everyone, and welcome to the Becoming an Empowered Parent online series, offering expert tools for embracing imperfection, building connection, and creating more peace and joy within your family. I'm so thrilled that you're here. I'm your host, Abby Zeichner. I'm a parent coach, mindfulness facilitator, and licensed clinical social worker. And today I am absolutely thrilled and overjoyed and honored to be joined by Karen Young of Hey Sigmund. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm really grateful to you for inviting me and for putting this together.
Oh, thank you, Karen. So before we dive into today's very, very juicy and important topic, we're going to be talking about strengthening children and teens against anxiety. I just wanted to share a bit more about Karen. So after working as a psychologist for many years, Karen founded the very popular website, Hey Sigmund, an online resource that provides contemporary research-driven information on parenting with a focus on anxiety. The website attracts millions of visitors each year. She is the author of 3 books, including the best-selling children's book, Hey Warrior. Karen is a sought-after speaker and consultant, both at home in Australia and overseas. So again, welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I have been such a huge fan. I was already telling Karen this. I've been such a huge fan of Karen and her work and a follower of the Facebook page, Hey Sigmund, for years. I would say I must share Karen's posts time and time again because they are just so incredibly valuable with the amount of information and resources and support that they offer for parents, for educators, as well as for kids and teens. I mean, there's a lot of parents that I will send Karen's post to and say, please have your teen read this, right? So it's really valuable. And I think with anxiety being so prevalent and with anxiety starting at such younger and younger ages, it's so important that we're having this conversation. And to me, it's so important to really continue the conversation, to take away and really do our best to remove the shame and the stigma that so often goes along with this topic. So I really, really am grateful to have you.
Thank you.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about you. And I was wondering if you could share a bit about your journey with us and how you got into this work. And if you'd like, I would love to hear about the name of your site, Hey Sigmund. I would love to hear that. I've always wondered where that came from. So anything you want to share about that too, as well.
Yeah. So the reason I got into this is I was a psychologist and I was in private practice and I lectured and did all of that. And when I was in private practice, I realized a lot of my work was information giving to parents. This was when I was working with kids and teens and families. A lot of my work was around information giving to parents. And I really wanted to find a way to have the information out there for everybody. And for sure, there are kids and teens and families who need that extra support, that extra one-on-one support from a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor. But the information is such a big part of it. So I started Hey Sigmund with that in mind, to get the information out there and just a place which has reliable, I try to keep ahead of the research, not try to, I do, it's important to me. But that kind of, that place where people could trust, anyone who has a child or teen in their lives. Now the name came from, the hardest part about starting the website was the name. I swear it was easier to name my own children because you've also got to find the domain name. And so for weeks and weeks, I was laser focused. I couldn't think of anything else. And then it was a Saturday afternoon trip to Bunnings, which is a big hardware, it's a big hardware store chain over here. And we went to Bunnings and I was with my family and I put my foot into the car and I said, what about Hey Sigmund? And it just came to me like that. And they all said, yeah, do that. That's great. And I'm quite certain that I could have said anything and they would have said, yeah, do that, because they were so fed up to go back to me of me going, what about? And I'm sure they all conspired that the next one that came out of my mouth, they were all just going to agree. I could have called it anything. But where it came from was, it's a bit of a nod to Sigmund Freud, who's often associated with psychology. Said a lot of things that were off the wall, and it's kind of saying, hey Sigmund, we've learned a few things since then. Hey Sigmund, we have some new ideas now. It's just that. And Sigmund is kind of a cool name. So I wanted to have that, a word that everyone can identify straight away with psychology, but the hey is kind of this is casual, this is jargon free, this is for all of us. We can all get something from this, and just really bring psychology into the everyday. That was my intention.
Oh, I love that. That's incredible. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, speaking of anxiety, let's dive in. So I know that anxiety can certainly take on so many forms, many of which parents aren't always accustomed to, such as aggression. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that. Can you talk about what forms the anxiety often takes in children and teens?
Yeah. So if we keep in mind that anxiety is fight or flight, and it's a physiological response from a brain that feels under threat. So our brain identifies threat, doesn't care if the threat's real or not, it'll just trigger, and then it starts a physiological response. So it is physical, but that physiology is designed to get us ready to fight the danger or flee the danger. So anxiety can look like flight, which is avoidance, withdrawal, ignoring, quiet, head down, looking away. And in little kids, that level of anxiety is really normal. It's normal for us to feel, we're wired to feel a bit threatened by strangers. That's how we're wired to feel close to our tribe and threatened by strangers. So that's normal. But it can also look like fight, which is aggression, tantrums, anger. And that's because the part of the brain, the amygdala, which is responsible for anxiety, is in charge of all big emotion. So when the amygdala is active, it's going to have other emotions fully charged as well. And at the end of the day, emotions are there for a really important reason. They're there to recruit support. So when you're in big emotion, people notice. They might not always notice the way you want them to notice, but they're going to notice. And so that fight part of anxiety is a really it's a very valid response. With kids, well, with any of us, anger is the only emotion that doesn't exist on its own. There's always something underneath it. So for kids, it might often be anxiety. So it might look like arguing or tantrums or aggression or meltdowns. It can look like that. It can look like exploding at the wrong thing or at the wrong time with a measure of emotion that just doesn't make sense, and that's out of proportion. So that's another way that anxiety can look. It can also look physical. So remembering that anxiety is that neurological surge, that chemical surge designed to get our bodies ready for fight or flight. It can look like sore muscles, headaches, sick tummies, jittery, restless movements. That's all they're all really normal ways that the body gears itself, it's a really normal response for the body to a brain under threat. It doesn't feel okay if it's at the wrong time, but we have to understand it's a brain and body doing exactly what they're meant to do. We have to really strip that pathology away from it.
Yeah, and I think that's something I know a lot of parents that I work with who have preschool age kids. And when they're constantly being sent home, or they're getting these phone calls because of all the aggression, and while some of it is certainly developmental, I think that sometimes it's hard for educators, for parents to understand what else is happening. And so sometimes they that focus just on the tip of I always think about the iceberg analogy, right? And just focusing on the behavior itself and not on what's happening underneath. We end up doing such a disservice to these kiddos.
We have to remember there's no such thing as a naughty child. There's no such thing as a naughty child. When we all do things that aren't very adorable, even as adults who have a fully developed thinking brain, we do things that are really off the wall sometimes. We don't do it because we're bad people. We do it because we're in a bad space, or because we're being triggered by something that doesn't feel okay. Our kids are the same. If they're doing things which aren't great, there will be an underlying reason for it. And I think, and a lot of the time it's anxiety. And if it is anxiety and we respond to that behavior as bad behavior, it just throws that brain more into threat. It's a disaster, because what we need in that space for an anxious child is to bring that brain back to safety. Brains feel safest when they're connected and close to their people. And when that person, or that important big person, is pushing against, shaming, disconnecting, excluding, that brain will go even more into threat. You might get the behavior you want, but it's not internalized. It's just, it's on the surface to restore that proximity, but it's not necessarily going to do anything for your influence in the future, or for how safe they feel coming to you with the big stuff when they're older. And anxiety is a big one. We need that brain to come back to safety. Doesn't mean we let them do whatever we want. Doesn't mean that they can create havoc. What it means is we have to wait until anxiety is calm and that thinking brain is back, and then we respond to the behavior.
Yeah, it's just having that, developing that curiosity as parents, right? That when we see these behaviors, rather than moving in so quickly, to be able to slow down and really get curious about what else is going on. And I think that's so, I mean, that's a piece of your work that has been so valuable in my own work. Yeah. Right, is just really understanding what is this anger and aggression all about, and that there's so much more to these feelings and these behaviors than meets the eye. So thank you for that. So I know that so much of your work really centers around educating children and teens and parents about the brain, which is so valuable and important. And I'm wondering if you could talk with us a little bit about what is happening in the mind and body of an anxious brain when that anxiety takes over. What is happening?
So when anxiety happens, what we have to remember with anxiety, and I think this is one of the things that can make it difficult to deal with, anxiety has got nothing to do with what is actually happening. It's what the brain perceives. And so the brain will call on memories or thoughts or experiences to assess whether something is safe or not. So from the outside, it doesn't look like there's anything to be anxious about, or we can't find the reason for the anxiety, but the brain knows what it's reacting to. So when the brain, it's the amygdala, anxiety comes from the amygdala. When the amygdala senses threat, it surges the body with a really powerful neurochemical cocktail designed to get the body ready for fight or flight. And that starts a whole series of changes in the body, including heart rate increases, digestion shuts down, muscles get primed to move. When the amygdala's on, other big emotions will be switched on. So there's lots of things happening in the body that are all really normal, that are exactly how things are meant to be. We might start sweating because the body's trying to cool ourselves down in case we have to fight or flee. And they're valid. They're a valid response. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. What it means is the brain has reacted at a time it didn't need to react to something. So the brain has perceived something it thinks is a threat, which isn't actually a threat. So, and that's why we have to strip the pathology away, because it is the brain doing what it's meant to do. It's the body doing what it's meant to do, but at a time it doesn't need to, or too much. So for sure, we want to calm it all down. We want to give kids the skills they need to be able to move through anxiety. So we want to lower anxiety, we want to build them up. And a lot of that is creating, a really important part is creating this awareness. Because anxiety feels so horrible, the automatic thought is, I feel like something terrible is going to happen. So something terrible must be going to happen. I can't go near that thing. And that's where we get avoidance. Whereas if we can start shining a light on, oh, well, of course you feel like this. This is because your brain thinks it's unsafe and it's getting your body ready to do this. And this is how it feels in your body and this is what's going on. It doesn't mean that thing's dangerous. It just means your brain is perceiving something and it wants to keep you safe just in case. Then we start to make the world feel safer for them. We actually start to put our kids in control of this response. So I feel like this. Just because I feel anxious doesn't mean I have to do anxious. I can feel anxious and do brave. I can feel anxious and I can get the job done.
And I can feel anxious, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me.
Exactly. Yeah. And
right?
that's a really important one. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So how can parents best support their child or their teenager who's really struggling with anxiety? What are some of the key do's and don'ts that you suggest to parents who are really having a difficult time with this, who don't know what to say, don't know what to do? I mean, I work with a lot of parents who will say, I said this and it was the absolute wrong thing, and then I'm stuck and I don't know what else to say. How can parents best support their kids who are struggling with anxiety?
So the first thing I want to say is, it doesn't matter how much we commit to getting this stuff right, we're going to get it wrong, because we are parents and we are human. And their anxiety will trigger our anxiety, which can put us in a space where our thinking brain isn't as switched on. It's okay. It won't break them. We just need to do it enough. So the most important thing is not supporting avoidance, because when we support avoidance, it actually catastrophizes the threat. So if kids are really anxious, say, about going to school, if we hold them back from school, it's only going to make it harder next time. It teaches the brain that school is actually dangerous, and the only way they can feel calm is by not going. So what we want to do is, but we don't have to do it all at once. So little step by little step by little step, we just want to have them moving forward in some way. It doesn't have to be the full step, but it just needs to be not supporting that complete avoidance. And the more they move forward to it, the brain changes from experience, especially the amygdala. The amygdala is primal and it only learns from experience. So the only way to change that association between something being a threat and something being safe is to actually have the experience of it being safe and not ending in disaster. It doesn't mean it'll feel good, but it'll feel safe enough. And that's what we want to get to. So the number one thing is not supporting avoidance. Number two is, I would say, kids are looking to parents for signs of safety all the time, all the time. They're looking to, whether it's a parent or it's the adult that they trust who's closest to them. They're looking to that parent for signs of safety. Am I safe? Do you see me? Do you see what's going on? And am I safe? It doesn't work just to say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, because what we're missing is catching what they see. So it's really hard for them to trust that don't worry about it, because what the brain does is it goes, well, the only reason you're saying that is because you're not seeing everything that's going on. You don't get how dangerous this is. The amygdala is dramatic, always dramatic. And so what we need to do is say, yeah, I can see why this feels big for you, and match it with the energy. You know what it's like when someone comes in and you're feeling really worked up or scared or angry, and they come in really zen? It doesn't always land the way it needs to. So we need to match the emotion a little bit, and say, yeah, I get why you don't want to go to school. I get why it's hard to sleep in your own bed. I really get it. I get that. I get why it's hard to go for the sleepover or whatever it is, or to try out for the soccer team. I really get it. I get anxious too when I have to try new things or when I have to do something that feels scary. I really get it. And I know you'll be okay. I know you can do this. How can we take small steps towards this? What can you do that was braver than last time you did? You don't have to do the whole thing. What can you do that was braver than last time? And we just keep moving them forward. In the same way we catch their anxiety, we'll catch their anxiety. They can also catch our calm. So when we are trying to help them feel calm and brave, it actually starts with us. It starts with us being calm. And it starts with us tapping into that part of us that knows that they will be safe enough, and that they have enough of what they need to be able to get through. So if it's something like camp, we might be worried that they're going to have a terrible time at camp, and they might have a terrible time at camp, but we also know they'll be safe. They're safe enough. And that's what we need to tap into and move them forward, because they will catch what we're feeling. And if we're feeling strong, calm and brave, eventually they will catch that. And anxiety, we're turning a big ship. If kids have been anxious for a while, we're turning a big ship. So anxiety can get worse before it gets better. but that worsening is a sign of progress, because we're giving the amygdala a shake and we're saying, hey, you got to wake up and we're going to do things a bit differently from now on. The amygdala is going to push back and go, oh, no, we're not. So we have to go, oh, yes, we are. And we're doing it together. But it's a really important part of getting kids through anxiety. So catch the emotion, see what they see, feed it back to them, validate what they're feeling with the same energy, and then move them forward.
It's really about empathy, which is such a huge piece of this. What do you say for parents when they find themselves, because you mentioned it a few times, when parents find themselves triggered by their child's anxiety? What are some things that what are some ways in which parents can sort of talk themselves through it in that moment so that it doesn't become more chaotic, more of an anxious thing than it needs to be? What do you often suggest?
First of all, remember that the fact that you're feeling anxious, in the same way we teach kids, what we're teaching kids is, just because you're anxious doesn't mean there's something to worry about. We need to remember that. So just because you're anxious about your child doing this, just because you're anxious about what's happening in front of you, doesn't mean that there's a problem. Of course they're going to be anxious. It is no reflection on your child, and it is no reflection on your parenting. This is something that we just need to manage. And I think when our kids are doing things that feel difficult or challenging, we do take it personally. That's what we do. And we worry for them. We have to remember that this is their growth. This is their growth. We are facilitating it and helping them open up to it, but this is their growth. So what we need to do is calm our own amygdala. We can do that. Strong, steady breathing is the best way, the most powerful way to calm the amygdala. It sends a message to the brain that gets it to relax. If we need to, we just need to take a minute to do that, to find that space. Tap into that part of you that knows you can do this. You're built for this, and they're built for this. Tap into that part of you that knows that for certain, and for certain you are built for this. And you know that they'll be safe enough. Whatever is happening in front of you, that's what happens when the brain is under threat. It's okay. We want to move them forward. And sometimes the other thing I say is, if you're feeling anxious about the same thing they're anxious about, it's okay to share that, as long as we do it from a position of strength. It actually opens things up for them. So if they're dealing with something, it might be going back to school after a long break. They will be anxious. We'll be anxious. We would probably feel anxious about going back to work after a long break, not because work's dangerous, but just because we don't know what it's going to look like. It's the same for them. We might be anxious too. It's okay to share that. I get it. I'm feeling anxious too, because this is a big day for us. I get it. And I know we can do this. It's okay to feel anxious. We can feel anxious and we can get the job done. And I'm here with you. But it is really important to do it from a position of strength.
Yeah, exactly. It's being able to help them find their courage. And I think it's so much about, as you're saying, being able to express our faith in their capability, right?
Sure.
That idea that we can do hard things. We can do this. We can get through this together. And the way and the power of that self-talk and being able to sort of befriend the anxiety, externalize it and befriend it in a sense, is such a powerful way to move through it rather than having it overtake us.
That's it. Yeah.
So one of the things, and I know I'd like to talk a little bit about mindfulness and exercise and sort of the role that they play in terms of helping our kids manage anxiety. And along with that, I know that so many parents will say, well, I've tried that and my child in the moment resists everything that I say, or they'll practice some deep breathing, or they'll practice some ways of talking back to the anxiety, talking back to the anxious thoughts, and their child becomes very resistant. Do you have any thoughts of what parents can do in those moments where they feel that their child is just rejecting all the suggestions that they're giving them?
Yeah. So we do it anyway. So if it's you don't need to wait for them to be on board. It's harder if it's older kids. Say if it's in relation to school, you can't just pick up an adolescent and put them in the car. But if they stay home, it might be things like, what makes it easier for them to resist school? Is it iPad? Is it screen time? Is it Wi-Fi? What is it that makes it easier for them to resist? And that does not mean that that is the reason that is the reason they resist, because they like it better at home, doesn't mean that at all. What it means is we as parents need to look at any way that we might make it easier for anxiety to win. So is it things like, do we go to soccer to try out for the soccer team, and then after 15 minutes of the battle, do we leave? Maybe we need to look at staying. Even if they don't play, we're just going to stay. Or something like that. Or we say, okay, so if it's not soccer, what is it going to be? Because I want you to try something. If it's school, it might be, I'll walk you to the classroom and I'll hand you to the teacher, and then I'll leave. And you slowly step back from that. Maybe you walk to the classroom, stay for 10 minutes and then leave. Then after a few weeks, you walk to the classroom, you don't stay for 10 minutes and you leave. After a few weeks, you walk to the school gate and watch them walk to the classroom. So we just look at ways we can step it back. There is no easy fix to this. So there is no magic wand that can make anxiety go away. And I want to say, as a parent who has been in this very situation, it's hard. And there'll be some days it'll be too hard and you'll want to scoop them up and take them home. That's okay as well. The thing to remember is the more you can move towards whatever is making them anxious, anxiety will get worse, it'll get big, and they might get really big feelings. That's all part of the movement towards anxiety, and then it will ease. The brain will learn. The brain will learn that this is okay and there is no point fighting it anymore. But as long as there is any chance that the fight will win, the brain will keep fighting. The amygdala will keep fighting. So we look at what is it that we do if it's separation anxiety, and every time you leave the house they're ringing you every 10 minutes. It might be that you say to them, I know how scary it is for you, so this is what we're going to do. I will call you when I get there, and then you can call me once or twice, and then I will call you when I'm on my way home. But you always have to tell them what you're doing. Don't just not pick up the phone, because that's just too scary and it's unnecessarily traumatic for them. So we just look at ways to wind it back. We don't need their consent. We don't need them. They might really react to that and go, no, you can't do that. You can't go. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Remember why you're doing it. You're doing it to teach this brain that that this is actually safe and it can actually be brave and it can actually get through this. It will feel horrible because we're wired to feel anxious when our kids are anxious. It'll feel awful.
That guilt and that shame, I'm assuming, just really gets goes crazy. Yeah.
But if it is
and I think the anger, I remember.
I was just gonna say, if it's something important, you got to remember why you're doing it. Remember why you're doing it. Yeah.
And it's hard. I think so much of our emotions get really caught up in this. I remember when my daughter was in first grade and was having severe separation anxiety and wasn't going to bed at night. And, as parents, we're tired and exhausted. And I remember I was angry and I was frustrated and I did all the wrong things. And like you said, it got worse. And eventually it's like, I just had to let go. I just had to let go of my agenda and my time and, kind of all that self-talk that was going on for me. Because what I realized is that, like we're talking about anger and aggression earlier in the talk today, that so much of my anger and frustration was really out of my fear. Oh my God, is she going to be okay? Is this ever going to end? And what's going to happen? And is she going to be anxious? It's like we really have to balance what's coming up for us to be able to really show up for our kids in the way that they really need us, because they, their nervous systems really need us for that. So I think it's that, getting comfortable with ourselves, as you said, is so important, and being able to talk ourselves through that is so important.
And remember too, you don't have to go the whole way. If you can just do one teeny, if they can spend 10 minutes longer in their bed for a few weeks, then 20 minutes longer in their bed. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how long it takes. They'll get there. They're not going to be 16 and not wanting to sleep in bed. They will get there. But in the meantime, we have this precious opportunity to teach them that the things that feel scary aren't always scary. And just because something feels scary, they're actually up for it. They can do it and they can smash it. And they are more powerful than they think they are. And they're stronger than they think they are. We have these opportunities now. And it's also okay for us to get angry and furious and sad and scared. It's okay for us to feel that. If when we feel that, we can step away and just get enough of a handle on that so we're not transferring that to our kids, then that's powerful. But it doesn't, their behaviour is no reflection on us as a parent, and our behaviour is no reflection on us as a parent. It's a reflection on the fact that this is hard. Parenting is hard, and we love these little people with everything in us, and we are so invested in everything being right, that sometimes when things feel wrong, it can feel bigger than it is. And it's not. It's all part of it. It's all part of it.
And it's a beautiful opportunity for us to learn, right? And move ourselves through these emotions and recognize that these are phases that our kids will go through, and that we just come out stronger because of them. So Karen, talk a little bit. I know, as I said, I know so much of your work is focused on mindfulness. We really share a passion for mindfulness. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about mindfulness and the role that it plays in managing anxiety.
Yeah. So mindfulness, if you think about anxiety as what if, anxiety is a future brain, what if, mindfulness brings us back to what is. So the more we can get into a regular practice of, the more we can encourage kids towards a regular practice of mindfulness, what we're doing is training that brain to stay in the moment when it needs to. Because with anxiety, it goes into the future, which is a scary place for brains to be, because we can't control anything. We can't respond to anything in the future. And of course, we need to be able to go into the future to plan and to do what we need to do. We also need to be able to come back and break that loop when we need to. So mindfulness does that. In terms of anxiety, what the research has shown really clearly and over and over and over is a regular practice of mindfulness calms activity in the amygdala. So that's the seat of anxiety in the brain. It means that the amygdala is less likely to jump at things that aren't actually threats. It strengthens activity in the prefrontal cortex, it increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, which we want that for all kids. It's regardless of anxiety, not anxiety, we want that. It's the learning brain, the thinking brain. It's the part of the brain that can actually calm anxiety, calm big feelings, and switch to plan B if we need to, problem solve, think ahead. It also strengthens the connection between the two, between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And we want that. We want the prefrontal cortex to be able to stay on when the amygdala is trying to hijack the brain. And mindfulness does that. It also teaches kids that they can have an anxious thought, but that without being that anxious thought, without becoming that anxiety. So a lot of mindfulness, it's about watching thoughts and just watching. Imagine there's a thought in front of you. Imagine your anxiety is sitting in front of you. Just watch it. Just let it be. And you don't have to become it. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to buy into it. And we all tend to do that with big feelings. We're meant to. That's what big feelings are there for, is to mobilize us towards action, but not all the time. And same with big thoughts. Not all the time. And mindfulness teaches us to be more discerning around the things that we actually let ourselves focus on and pay attention to.
Yeah, and there's something just so different and so powerful about actually accepting the emotion, right? I mean, anxiety is typically the thing that we all want to push away. And as you said at the beginning, I mean, it's the worst feeling. We feel it everywhere, and we just want to get rid of it, and we just want to make it stop. And yet learning that practice of being able to welcome it and sit it down, when we talk about mindfulness, I always say I pull up a chair and I sit my anxiety next to me and I say, hey, anxiety, I know you. You come often. Nice to see you. How's it going? What do you need to tell me today? Right? So being able to welcome it in that way is what allows it to lessen, right? To dissipate, to at least move through us, so that it doesn't become this thing that completely overwhelms us. And I know that's what I've just found to be so powerful with this practice, especially especially when it comes to anxiety.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Karen, I'm wondering if you have any other kind of parting words of wisdom or other tips or strategies that you wanted to offer to our listeners and viewers before we end today.
It's probably more around, I think it's really important that we strip the pathology from anxiety, and we need to talk about it to our kids. And what I get a lot is, do we use the word anxiety? Do we use the word anxious? Yeah, we do, because we use the word angry, we use the word sad and jealous and furious and scared. So we need to use the word anxious, because it's a horrible thing to have a feeling and not have words to put to it. So we need to give them the words. And if we can do that, and if we can speak about it openly, it gives it space to be. It's not going to make anxiety worse, and then it can go. But not until we let it be, can we let it go. So it can be scary, and it feels scary, and when it's happening to our kids, it can feel terrible. And it's okay. It's manageable. We can do this, and it doesn't mean that it's not about breakage. It's not about who they are or who you are as a parent. It's part of being human.
That so many are going through this, right? So many are experiencing this, and that I think that the normalization of it, for kids to know that they're not alone, for parents to know that they're not alone, and for parents to know that they're not alone in raising kids who are struggling with this, because it's really, really difficult. It's a very difficult struggle, and it's about finding our brave, which is so much of what you talk about and what I love and so appreciate about your work, is really finding our brave. So I again just want to say thank you so much. I know you're so gracious and generous in offering a free gift for our viewers. Do you want to share what that is?
Yes. So it's 20% off the books and plushies in the Hey Sigmund store. With the code that I think you're going.
Yeah. Yes, everything will be, there'll be a link, and there will be a code that will go along with that, so that everybody can take advantage. I encourage all of you to check out Karen's work, especially her book. Karen, what would you say? Because I always think of them for the littles, but for Hey Warrior, amazing, and Hey Awesome, and I know you have two others. What age would you say those books are best for?
So for Hey Warrior especially, well, for all of them, I wrote them 5 to 12, for 5 to 12, but here's the thing. With Hey Warrior especially, I know adults are reading it and learning about it.
That's so awesome. I love that. That's awesome.
The reason I wrote it for kids is because if you can put it into a kid's book, anyone can understand it and anyone can read it in 5 minutes. It's a 5-minute read. It's the process of anxiety which is relevant. The concepts in Hey Warrior and Hey Awesome are relevant for all of us. So I know it's helped a lot of adolescents. It's helped a lot of adults. For adolescents, I always say, I know you're too cool for the photos. I know you're too cool for the illustrations. I know that, but just listen to the words, because that's what matters. But it's understanding what happens in our brains and body during anxiety. That's the key. That's the magic. And that's when we can start to shift the response to anxiety. So even though it is a kid's book, even though it's written as a kid's book, it is really for everybody.
Got it. That's amazing. I love that. So Karen, how can people find you? How can they follow you? Please let us know.
So Hey Sigmund is the Hey Sigmund shop, www.heysigmund.com. In the shop, it's all there for Hey Warrior, but more importantly, all the articles relating to anxiety in kids, they're all there in the one spot. In the drop-down menu, anxiety in kids and teens, they're all there. So it just flourishes what we've talked about today. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. So I'm trying to be everywhere, and YouTube. I've just started YouTube as well for
That's
video.
Right. I saw that you're offering some videos for kids and teens to be able to manage. It's amazing. Karen is everywhere. I please, I recommend everybody search out Karen and her work, because it has been so valuable, the amount of resources and tools that you offer. And I know so many kids and teens that have really benefited from so many of your, as I said, I've shared so many of your posts, and I say to parents, just have your child read this, please, because it's so relatable. It's so relatable. It's so tangible. I love even just like your bullet points for me are really useful. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So helpful and really valuable. So thank you, Karen, again for being here. I really invite everybody to spend some time, get your journals, write down your thoughts, some of your big takeaways, some of the reflections that you have from today, and thinking about just, what's one thing that you want to commit to after listening to today's show. So thank you all again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for another day of the Becoming an Empowered Parent series. So bye for now. Thank you again, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks.